back to Taja's Garden. I'm the gardening realtor. If you're new here, I'm glad you're here, and if you're returning, welcome back. So today we're going to be talking about 22 plants and vegetables that you could be starting right now in July. I want you guys to keep in mind that whenever you're starting your plants from now on, you need to be focusing on your first frost date. And if you are in the same zone as me, our first frost date is going to be October the 30th. Usually we have a surprise frost that comes around like the second week of October. So just make sure that you have your frost cloth ready for that. Then you'll start getting more consistent frost coming the end of October, heading on into November. In the coming months, we're going to be planting with that in mind. The plants we're starting right now are going to be the ones that are frost tolerant. In the next couple of months, we'll be starting the ones that are frost hardy. So those are two different things. Let's get started. So July is always that turning point for me where I absolutely am over gardening because it's way too hot and I'm trying to avoid going outside. So usually I do my gardening in the morning. I set the timer to water my garden and I check before it gets really hot. Or I'll go check my garden later in the evening, but you won't really catch me outside in my garden. So during this time, I usually have plants growing that can basically take care of itself. So like okra, which is on the list. Make sure that you put okra in your garden. If you have not already started planting your okra, remember I said your first frost date is October the 30th. And if you are not in the same zone as me, make sure that you look up your first frost date because that is extremely, extremely important. Given that our first frost day is in October, that only gives us about 207 gardening days total. That means you have to be extremely strategic when it comes to your planting. Make sure that you're paying attention to the maturity date and make sure that you add a couple of weeks for buffer time, especially since it is really, really hot now. That could slow down the germination rate of your seeds with the soil being really, really hot. Another thing that you want to make sure of is that you have your shade cloth for your garden because heat stress is extremely real when it comes to gardening, especially during these summer months. That can actually cause some of your plants to go to flower too early, or it can stunt their growth. So you want to make sure that you have some shade cloth available just so you can help, shade them away from the extreme heat. That is actually going to prolong your harvest and make things a lot easier for you. Okay, so after your okra, next we're going to go ahead and start planning to get started on our brassicas. So that's going to be your collard greens, kale, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower, bok choy, pak choy. You get the point. Your brassicas are going to be your frost tolerant plants, so they are going to do phenomenal in those light frosts. They are not frost hardy, so they cannot withstand long periods of frost, but light frost is okay. So if you get those surprise frosts, brassicas they know how to endure it. This year I'm actually going to be growing purple sprouting broccoli this fall, so I'm actually really excited about that. The thing about brassicas, they're frost tolerant, but they also do not like extreme heat. So if the weather is above 85 degrees consistently, it can signal to that plant to go ahead and go to flower, and that is not what you want. So what I am going to be doing is starting my brassicas indoors, and if you do not have an area inside your house to start your seeds, you can actually start them in some shade and they'll be perfectly fine. And I will be transplanting them into my garden towards the end of August, beginning of September. Very end of August or first week of September. The reason why I'm so specific about that timeline is because remember our first frost date is going to be coming up very soon, and you want to make sure that you give your plants time to get you a good harvest. If not, you'll lose them before you ever get a chance to harvest from them. So after I move them outside into my garden, I'm going to make sure that I cover them with 40% shade cloth on days that it is extremely hot. make sure that you pay attention to the weather. I know this is a lot of work, but if you're wanting to grow some things during the fall, this is what you have to do. Make sure that you are paying close attention to the weather. If you see that it is going to be 90 degrees or more for a long stretch of time, make sure that you just cover them with some shade cloth and they'll be completely fine. On days where it may be a little warm but cloudy, you don't have to cover them. But yeah, just keep that in mind. If they get too hot, they might just bolt on you before you ever get a chance to harvest anything. And for the bok choy and pak choy, you want to make sure that you succession plant those every 2 to 3 weeks. They grow extremely fast. Usually the maturity date is just 50 days. By the time you plant them, you turn around and realize it's already time to harvest. So every 2 to 3 weeks, you want to make sure that you keep succession planting them, sow some more seeds. Because they are also frost hardy. Actually, they do pretty good in the winter time. So if you want to make sure that you have these in your garden heading into the winter, continue to succession sow them. Next are tomatoes. So if you are wanting to have fall tomatoes in your garden, you want to get started now, immediately. But for me, I am only going to be growing the 42-day tomato from M.I. Gardener. I actually got them this year and I absolutely love them. I grew them along with Roma and large red cherry tomatoes in my garden. The 42-day tomatoes gave me tomatoes until my Roma and red large cherry tomatoes were ready. Once they get established, they'll put out all of their flowers and produce those tomatoes, and then they'll die off. So if you want to be strategic about it, make sure that you plant them in time for you to be able to get a good tomato harvest to store before the winter comes. So in the springtime, I planted the 42-day tomatoes at the same time that I started my Roma and my red large cherry tomatoes, but my 42-day tomatoes gave me tomatoes way earlier than my other tomatoes. And as soon as I was done harvesting everything off of the 42-day tomatoes and they died off, then my tomatoes on my Roma and red large cherry tomatoes started to ripen. So I have been harvesting tomatoes for months now. So that is something that I think I'm going to continue doing in the next couple of years. This is my first year growing 42-day tomatoes and I am extremely impressed. If you didn't have good success out of your tomatoes this spring and early summer gardening season, make sure that you add 42-day tomatoes to your list for the fall. Next up are your melons. So I'm talking cantaloupe, honeydew, and watermelon. With the watermelon, you want to make sure that you grow short maturing varieties. And you already know the ones that I love growing are the sugar baby watermelons. They are amazing. They're very sweet. They don't take up a ton of space. And I have a lot of fun things that I have planned for them. I actually want to try to make some watermelon sorbet this year, so looking forward to that. Anyway, make sure that you add watermelon, cantaloupe, and honeydew to your list. They absolutely love this weather, so they're going to just grow and grow and grow. The one thing that I will say is that you want to make sure that you watch out for aphids, because this year, for some reason, I'm having a ton of issues with aphids on my watermelon leaves. And that will definitely slow down the production. If you see those aphids underneath those leaves, you want to make sure that you spray them off. If you see a ton of ants around your watermelons or honeydew or cantaloupe, make sure that you are spraying them off because they are what's bringing the aphids. And they also love the sugar content in the fruit once the fruit starts ripening up. And you want to make sure that you get these started immediately so that they have enough time to produce for you. So if you have not started pumpkins, you want to make sure that you get those started. I usually say that June is the absolute last time that you have to start your pumpkins. But in reality, you have just a little bit more time, just a couple of weeks if you get those short maturing day varieties of those pumpkins. So the very small ones, you can get started immediately and you should be able to have them by the end of October. For example, this is the one that I'm growing this year and it takes 95 days to mature, but you also have to give account of the week or two for germination, the possibility of heat stress or pest damage or whatever. So over 100 days, and this is a small variety. Make sure that you add those sweet potatoes, and if you have not started potatoes, or if you're curious on if you can do another round, you do have some more time, go ahead and get started with those quick maturing potatoes. So the Yukon potatoes or the red variety potatoes, go ahead and get those started. They will produce for you at least before it gets extremely hot. Once it gets really hot, they tend to slow down a little bit, but they'll still grow. You just want to make sure that you get them started in time for them to produce something for you before the winter comes, because they will not produce at all. They'll actually die off if the temperatures get too cold. And make sure that you go ahead and start your sweet potatoes if you have not already started them. Next up is sweet corn. If you want to get those started in your garden, you can absolutely grow them. A couple of years ago, I started growing sweet corn in my garden. I actually grew them in my raised bed. I saw videos of someone growing them in grow bags, and I was very, very curious. So I started growing them in my raised bed, and they did wonderful. So if you are curious on if you can grow sweet corn in your backyard, you absolutely can, and you can get that started right now. Next up are Swiss chard, tomatillos, and beans. So I'm also growing tomatillo in my garden, and they are actually doing wonderful. But if you're wanting to grow some for the fall, go ahead and get those started. Beans also do very well in the heat, so get those started as well. That is your pole bean and your bush beans. And as you know, I'm always adding Swiss chard to my list, so make sure that you add that to your list if you're wanting a alternative for spinach. And it's really, really easy to grow. I actually have it growing in my garden, but I have not harvested any of it. But it's there whenever I'm ready for it. It's also very, very pretty. There are so many different types and different colors that you can choose from to grow in your garden, so make sure that you add that to your list as well. Next up are your squash and zucchini. So I am actually going to get started on growing some zucchini. I absolutely love zucchini, and it's a big surprise that I have never grown it, because usually I have so many other ideas on what to grow and I never have enough room left when it comes to putting squash in my garden. And also, if I'm being honest, I kind of wanted to avoid the squash vine borer. So I actually have had issues with the squash vine borer with my pumpkins, and I am fighting the eggs as we speak in my garden with my pumpkins. But one thing that I can say is starting them now will kind of be a little easier, because the pest pressure for them it's actually a bit slower around this time of year. I also saw things where some people, they swear by putting foil around the stem of your squash plants. I haven't tried that. I might, but I'm a little worried on the heat. So I'm not sure. Right now though, what I have been doing is going out with some tape and actually getting off the squash eggs. It's been working wonderful for me. And also, if you have seen me use those little baskets, the trash bins that I get from Dollar Tree, cover them up before they get too big. Cover them up, and that will help you out as well. So just make sure that you are keeping an eye out, because they are some really annoying pests. And it's really not much that you can do to just get rid of them. All you can do is just stay consistent with checking your plants and staying on top of everything. So that concludes our list of 22 crops that you could get started in July. One thing I want to leave with you is make sure that you heavily mulch your plants, because it is going to be a very hot summer and you want to try to keep in as much moisture as possible. Let me know down in the comments, are you starting anything for the fall? Are you planning on having a fall garden? If you are starting anything in your garden that I did not mention, drop them in the comments. I would love to know what you're planting. Might give me some ideas. Also, I'm considering starting some more flowers. So if you are starting some flowers this month, please let me know down in the comments. If you have not already subscribed, please subscribe, hit that notification bell. And if you want to be part of an amazing gardening community, head on over to Facebook, type in Prosper and Plant, and I will see you over there.